Jiminy Crickets.
Jiminy Cricket is the name. I'm a happy-go-lucky fellow, always getting in wrong for singing my song. A merry old soul am I. Jiminy Cricket is the name. I'll be hanging around this evening. I'll be tipping my hat and telling you that Jiminy Cricket is the name.
Hello, Cricketeers, and welcome to our September 2021 episode of Dateline Jiminy Crickets. Hello, Ruthie.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. On this episode, we have a top 10 list, and then we have a very special interview with a Imagineer, Disney and theme park historian, and book author, Christopher Merritt, that we're looking forward to. But before we get started, let us go through some of the events and things that we want to promote for our podcast network. First of all, once again, I'd like to wish the Vacation Kingdom of the World a happy 50th anniversary, which is coming up in just a couple weeks on October 1st. And in addition, we'd like to remind you all that we have a Patreon, and on there you can help us continue to bring you magic such as this podcast, our regular Jiminy Crickets podcast, and the DisneyChris.com website. And we offer special rewards to those who help contribute. Even at the $1 level, you get a special reward of audio content every month. And the more you donate, the higher and the more rewards you will receive. And to get to our Patreon and check out everything, you can go to www.patreon.com/DisneyChris. And Ruthie, why don't you talk about our merchandise?
We have an online store where you can purchase merchandise, and it has two logos. So it's the DisneyChris.com logo or the Dateline Jiminy Crickets logo. You can choose, and you can put either of those logos on a variety of different types of merchandise, such as some of the ones you're seeing here today: mugs, shirts, stickers, notebooks, tote bags,
Tote books.
Tote books. Tote books and notebooks. So you can go to our website there. It's jcricketpodcast.threadless.com, and that's where you can go ahead and start picking and choosing all of the things you want to put our logo on.
We're also on Instagram at DisneyChris_JC_podcast. And our Jiminy Crickets co-host, Brian Crawford, runs our Instagram for us, and he posts specially curated images of Disney, mostly vintage Disney parks, and fun images such as what you're seeing here. Pretty much every day a new image. Not every day, but at least 5 days a week. And if you'd like to follow him, he's also on Instagram, Keeping Walt in Disney, all one word. And in addition to the images that he shares, which are sort of the same type of images, plus some personal things, the things he collects and his Disney memorabilia. He also does he's been doing a special streaming thing where he picks a classic Disney live-action film and sort of talks about it in a live stream, and then he'll post that to his page. after it streams, so you can go back later and watch it. And they're pretty fun. I've participated in a few of them, and as an audience member, not on it, but because you can chat. There's a chat box you can participate. And what's this, Ruthie?
Well, this is our Facebook group. It's Jiminy Crickets Podcast, and if you would like to join and talk to us about all the things we do, get on Facebook and just ask to join and answer the questions that we have there, so we can make sure you're not a bot, and we'll accept you into our group.
Now, we do have another podcast called Jiminy Crickets, as opposed to this one, which is Dateline Jiminy Crickets. And on there, it's a more historical perspective of Disney. And recently, we did a podcast on the original Fantasyland dark rides. And we did a two-parter that in July and in September that covered the Alice in Wonderland film, which is celebrating its 70th anniversary. And next month, we'll be talking about Tokyo Disneysea, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. And one of us, Brian, has been to Tokyo Disneysea, so we'll get him on there and he'll share his thoughts on that, what many people consider the greatest theme park in the world. So to listen to these and all of our past shows, you can go to jcricketspodcast.blogspot.com. And then we have another podcast in addition to Jiminy Crickets called Down the Rabbit Hole. What is Down the Rabbit Hole, Ruthie?
This is an exclusive podcast just for Patreon subscribers. And this is a kind of more off-the-cuff conversation that we have, expressing our feelings about different things going on with the Disney company, or just a little bit more intimate kind of conversation. No research or anything like that. Just a little bit more, you can learn more about us through these podcasts.
Yeah.
So we have that for our subscribers.
Yeah, and it's for the $5 level or higher. And we have planned for this month's episode a trivia contest. I came up with a bunch of questions. I already came up with I have everything all written down and ready to go. And I'm going to question Brian and Ruthie and see who's
going to win.
Yeah. So this is the first time I've come up with it. We've done this before, but this is the first time I'm the one doing the questioning. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what that's like. Now, over on my website, I have what we call the Disney Song of the Day. And every day of the year, we post a different song, 365 days of the year. And as a special bonus, every 4 years, I post an additional song. And so, did that fly over your head,
Yes.
Ruthie?
No, I got it.
Leap
I
year?
got what you're saying, leap year, yeah.
So this month that we're in, I'm currently posting a special song in tribute to the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World, all month long. And next month, starting October 1st, every day of the month I'll be posting a Disney villain song for Halloween. So 31 Disney villains will be recognized for the month of October. And also on my website is the Disneyland Magical Audio Tour. And we have a new mobile-friendly, well, I guess it's not very new anymore, but if you prefer to listen on your mobile device, you can go to the website and enter the, either click on the home page, or you can enter the URL disneychris.com/311, and you'll be able to experience it, a more mobile-friendly layout that's easier to navigate using a cell phone or whatever. So before we get on to our fun topics this episode, we have a very special announcement. Dateline Jiminy Crickets proudly endorses Concierge Vacation Planners, a Disney-authorized specialty vacation planning service. Concierge doesn't just book your trip, they walk you through the entire process, helping you plan out every detail, one-on-one, to make the very most out of your vacation while saving you both time and money. And the best part is, they charge nothing for their services. You will get the exact same pricing as if you booked your vacation directly through Disney. But in using Concierge's expertise, you've got the added bonus of having your very own personal Disney Guru planner by your side. Both Ruthie and I are also satisfied customers, and we just can't recommend them enough. Visit their website at www.concierge.com. That's www.concierge.com, as in mouse ears. So when you book your next Disney vacation, be it Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Line, or many of the other Disney destinations available worldwide, contact Concierge Vacation Planners and be sure to tell them Disney Chris sent you. Well, here we are again, and as per tradition, we are going to start this episode with another Disney Top 10 list. We had a little bit of difficulty. We had a different idea, and I can't even remember what our other idea was, but we found that it was too complicated, so we just decided to do something a little less difficult. And we decided, since we just recently had the Summer Olympic Games in Japan, we thought that it might be fun to talk about Sport Goofy, who is sort of the Disney mascot for all sports, including the Olympic Games. And this was actually Ruthie's idea, even though I'm probably going to do most of the talking.
Yeah.
Because I've seen all of these shorts many, many times, whereas Ruthie has only seen a few of them. Now, we're going to talk about basically what are known as the how-to shorts, which are a series of cartoons that were narrated by sort of a stuffy, mid-Atlantic accented narrator, and Goofy just sort of was the guinea pig or the example.
Yeah.
And he sort of represented the everyman, even though he's technically a dog. But now there are more than 10 Disney or Goofy how-to shorts, and not all of them are called how-to, but a lot of them are, like how to quit smoking, how to go on a diet. You know, there's all sorts of different ones, and they're not all sports related. Mm-hmm. But the 10 that we picked are really the only ones. There's only 10 that are sports related, so it sort of worked out. And because I'm the only one who's seen them all, I ranked them in sort of the order that I enjoy them. So these are sort of my rankings of my least to most favorite. But I love them all. I just like some more than others, but I love all of these shorts. I love all the Goofy how-to shorts. They're some of my favorites, so we'll go through them, but this is all me. Ruthie will, of course, chime in,
yeah.
But she had nothing to do with these rankings. So you can
So
only
if you
blame...
don't like it, don't
Yeah.
come after me.
Yeah, you only have me to blame.
Yes.
So the first one is from 1949, and this series lasted from about 1941 into like the early mid-50s, like around 53-ish. Even though there were a few later entries that kind of fit into the how-to format. Like, there's one called Aquamania that's from 61 that's kind of reminiscent of the how-to. That's really technically the final how-to. But
They had a newer one, I thought, like how to set up your entertainment center.
yeah, but that's a later... That's not part of the original theatrical.
Right.
That was a made-for-Disney Channel thing. But that was definitely emulating this original series. So this one is called Tennis Racket, a play on words like, it's a racket.
Yeah, you're making a racket.
Well, I think of it like it's a sort of a scheme.
Oh.
Like a racket.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I always thought of it. I mean, you're probably... your idea.
I remember my mom used to say that to us, so...
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, and you're probably right. I'm probably wrong. But anyway, this was from 1949. It's basically... The funny thing is, every character... There's multiple characters in these, but every single character is Goofy. Yeah. Like, Goofy has, like, clones of himself. And oftentimes they'll call him Mr. Geef. G-I-E-F. I think his name might be Goofy Geef. I don't know.
GG. Sometimes they call him that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Tennis Racket is basically how to play tennis. They could have called it How to Play Tennis.
Right.
And here's the first one that's actually called How To, which is our number 9. And this is How to Play Golf. So it basically has a narrator describing everything, and they always have like, and now, in slow motion, and they always show it in slow motion, and then it's kind of cute.
So, are they saying that you smoke a pipe when you play golf?
Not necessarily, but I'm sure in 1944 it wasn't uncommon.
Right.
And then this is another great one from 1944 also. How to Play Football. Wonder what this one's about.
Right, I know, right. This is one of the ones I've seen.
Yeah, so this is more like college football, because they really didn't have pro football in the 40s yet. That came along, I think, in the 60s. Believe it or not, that late. So basically football was a college only. So they're also wearing the older style costumes, which were contemporary for 1944, believe it or not. So the next one is not called How To, but this is the one about basketball. And this one is called Double Dribble. Another play on words. This is from 1946, and isn't this the one where they say, here come Morgus and Versino out of the penalty box, and here go...
No, that's hockey, isn't it?
Oh, and I don't think we have hockey on our list, so...
Yeah.
We somehow... I like that one. I would have added it to our list. We must have missed that one. But I love that part where they keep going in and out of the penalty box,
that's
and then they start fighting each other the moment.
Yeah.
So the next one, this was actually featured in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and it's sort of a mistake because that movie takes place in 1947, but this cartoon didn't come out until 1949. And this is where they show how to, basically weightlifting, but they call it gymnastics. They show shadow boxing and... Oh no, that's from another one. There's a How to Box, which I think is called something else. But this shows him doing different weightlifting and exercise stuff. It's kind of funny. He ends up going out of the window to his apartment. And then the next one is called The Olympic Champ, and this is sort of covering track and field. Mm-hmm. And it starts off with a montage of the Olympic torch throughout time, and it starts with the original Olympic Games, and then it shows them running through time up to the modern day, and then it goes through all the Olympic, track and field events.
Like the decathlon kind of things.
Yeah, and the discus and the pole vault and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one, which is one of the best ones, I think, How to Play Baseball. You've seen that one, haven't you?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one's really good.
Is that Brian's favorite?
Probably.
Because he likes baseball.
No, his favorite is the one I picked, because he said to me, "You better have picked that one for number one."
As the first one. Okay.
So this is the one with the shadow boxing, the art of self-defense. And the shadow actually comes to life and ends up fighting him. Have you seen that one?
It sounds familiar. I can't say for sure, but yeah, it definitely sounds familiar.
Now this one they showed on HBO, I remember, when they were showing Return from Witch Mountain on HBO. They had like 3, because it didn't run a full 2 hours, it included a package of 3 Disney shorts. I think Magician Mickey was one of them. And this was definitely one of the other ones. So I saw this multiple times as a kid on HBO. And that, I guess, because of nostalgia is why I really like it. But one of my favorite parts is where he, there's a piano stool on wheels, and he gets on the stool and practices doing swimming strokes on the piano stool. And the piano stool, and he's not paying attention to anything but making sure he does the swimming strokes properly. He ends up going out into traffic and stopping traffic. Yeah, it's really cute. I love it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, goofy.
And now the number one is actually the very first how-to, which is called The Art of Skiing, pronounced skiing. That's what the narrator says.
Yes.
But this one, he's in a mountain lodge, and he wakes up in the morning, he's got hot water bottles, and he ends up getting dressed, and he gets tangled up in his skis, and he ends up going down the slalom. And
I have seen this one. This one's funny.
Isn't
this the one where they first have the yell?
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yep.
Yes. This is where the woo comes from. This is the first time you hear that. So that's our top 10 list, Ruthie. How do you think we did?
I think we did good. You wanted to mention, too, how many of them are on Disney+.
Oh, that's right. 6 of these are on Disney+. Not all of them are, and we were sort of questioning why they aren't. I think The Art of Skiing is definitely on there. Hold on, I have to pull up my list, Ruthie. Thanks.
Okay, sorry.
I wasn't
Chris
prepared.
Isn't prepared, everybody. Sorry.
Definitely The Art of Skiing, I remember, and also How to Swim is definitely on Disney+.
Yeah, probably the football one.
I think football and baseball. Hold on, I found where my list is. I just have to open it. So The Art of Skiing, How to Play Baseball, The Olympic Champ, How to Swim, How to Play Football, and Double Dribble are all available on Disney+. The 4 that aren't are The Art of Self-Defense, Tennis Racket, Goofy Gymnastics, and How to Play Golf. These were released, however, in the Disney Treasures Goofy edition. the tin box series. And
that has like all of the Goofy.
That has every
on
single Goofy short. And also, these were shown time in, time again on the Disney Channel growing up. So, I'm sure eventually they'll all be placed on Disney Plus.
Hopefully.
I think they're trying to do a slower rollout, so they continually have new things to be adding. So, Ruthie,
I know they
took
a lot of scenes from these too when they did that DTV where they would take a song and turn it into like a video with different Disney cartoons, and I know they took a lot of scenes from these.
From all of these classic shorts, including these.
Yep.
So, Ruthie, are you ready to meet Chris Merritt?
I am ready. I'm excited.
All right. Well, let's get on with our special interview. Well, we have a very special guest and a very special interview today with Christopher Merritt. He is a Imagineer, theme park designer, a historian of Disney and theme parks, and also an accomplished author. And we welcome you, Chris. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for having me on, you guys.
So, Chris and Ruthie and I are going to go through some wonderful images that he sent to us and sort of share with you some of his anecdotes and stories and experiences working in the theme park industry. And then we're going to talk about some of his books and his most recent publication, which is all about legendary Disney Imagineer and a personal friend of Christopher, one Marc Davis. And he knew Marc and Alice Davis quite well and spent a lot of time in their home getting to know them during the last 10 years of Marc Davis's life. And Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. Well, let's see. Up until last year, I spent most of my career working as a theme park designer with Walt Disney Imagineering. Did a brief stint in Singapore for Universal Studios, working on their park. And then just about me in general, I was lucky enough to grow up in Orange County, Southern California in the 1970s, and was lucky enough to spend a lot of time at Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm, and so I kind of always had those parks on the brain, and I have a deep love for the history and the designers who created all these attractions that I was lucky enough to grow up with. So that definitely has influenced me in both my work and, of course, obviously the books that I've written.
And one of your earliest inspirations, and a kindred spirit to both of us, because he's definitely an inspiration to my artwork as well, is Sam McKim. And you have done some various artwork and fun maps based on the work of Sam McKim. And one project you were given was this map here, which is the revitalized Tom Sawyer Island, which became the Pirate's Lair on Tom Sawyer Island. Tell us about this map, Christopher.
Well, it was interesting because, the idea of taking Tom Sawyer Island, which goes back to 1956, and kind of overlaying it with the theme of the Johnny Depp Pirates of the Caribbean movies was a bit controversial at the time. And I know for myself, I kind of felt uneasy with it, but regardless, it was what they were going to do. And so Chris Runco, who was kind of the art director on the project, asked me to do a fun map that they were going to hand out to people. For those of you who don't know, they used to hand out these little fun maps for Tom Sawyer Island back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And I believe Herb Ryman did the first one, although I think Claude Coates may have done one of them too. There were several versions. So when I got asked to do this, I thought, well, I want to kind of honor the way that they did it, but I also really wanted to take kind of a Sam McKim approach. So Sam McKim did these amazing fun maps in the 60s and 70s, and I'm a big fan of both his painterly work, but more specifically his pen and ink line work. So that was kind of an attempt to do that. And there's actually a secret blacklight level on the map that when you hold it up to a UV light, it's supposed to light up. Maybe I have the wrong kind of blacklight. It's actually never worked for me, but I've had other friends who say it works just fine. So kind of interesting. And you can also find my kids' names hidden in the foliage up at the top right there. So look for Devin and Dylan somewhere in the foliage.
That's so cool.
This is definitely inspired by the art style of Sam McKim. It's reminiscent of his early fun maps that he did of the entire Disneyland park. And the audience can't see it, but you actually, behind you on your wall in your office, you have that map framed. And I have that map too. I love that, and it's been an inspiration in my artwork. So we share that.
If you look at any of those 60s Sam McKim fun maps, it's really studying it. It's a master class on how to do these and how to lay things out and how to cheat, really. So if you don't have enough room to put in everything exactly as it lays out, there's ways to cheat and show the things you want to show. So McKim was a master at that.
Absolutely. Now we have another fun map that you did, but this one's a little different because this is something you did of an attraction that no longer exists. So you had to sort of use your knowledge of history and a little imagination for this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the fun map of Nature's Wonderland, which is I loved as a little kid growing up. I have very vague, Zapruder-like, memories of the different scenes in them. I definitely can remember seeing the bobcat on the cactus, and remember going into the Rainbow Cavern section, which is kind of a Claude Coates masterpiece. But this fun map I did for Leon Jansen, who did the long-missed E-Ticket magazine. And it was interesting to do, and the only way I was able to really figure out exactly where everything was my friend Dave Mumford, who was one of the co-authors of the Nickel Tour and a wonderful Imagineer. He kind of snuck me the elevations and the plan views for this attraction so I could actually figure out really where everything was. That's why the caverns are so accurate, and where all the animals sit, it's very accurate to where it was, at least on opening year.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And Ruthie, you actually, we all used this map for our own research when we did a recent episode of our Jiminy Crickets podcast on Nature's Wonderland. This map was really helpful in helping us understand the layout of this long gone attraction. So
it's interesting. I see people constantly confuse the 1956 Rainbow Caverns Mine Train version with the 1960 Nature's Wonderland version, and they're actually quite different in a lot of ways, other than the Rainbow Cavern section at the end being the same.
Right, right. And I actually taught Ruthie that too. She didn't quite understand that and neither did Brian until we did the episode. So this map helped me explain that to her. So
good.
The next image is wonderful. It's with another Disney legend, Imagineer extraordinaire Tony Baxter, and you were given the assignment of revitalizing a Disneyland classic, the Sleeping Beauty Castle diorama. What was that like?
Well, it's interesting. I had been friends with and known Tony for quite some time because we're both kind of Disneyland history nerds, obviously. So I was pitching some ideas to him in his office one day. And one of the things I had pulled out was I had found some of the original drawings for the castle walkthrough as it was in 1957. So for those of your listeners who don't know, the 1957 version of the walkthrough actually opened before the film came out. So the film was still in production. And the castle was not really designed to have these little dioramas like it is now. But Walt asked Ken Anderson to design and art direct this show, and it's very much in the vein of the early, the mid-1950s Fantasyland dark rides. So I was talking with Tony about it and looking at these drawings, and Tony said, this is like the original 50s version of the walkthrough was so much better than what's there now, because in the 70s they replaced it with all these dimensional figures. In fact, we derisively called it the Barbie doll version, because
Right.
there literally were Barbie dolls that they had stuck in there as Princess Aurora, and it was
Right.
just not. It didn't look like the Ivan Earl stylization of the film. It's the goal to me. So Tony said, "You know what we should do?" He said, "I just did this Little Mermaid DVD, and as one of the supplemental features, they recreated my idea for the Little Mermaid ride that was going to go at Euro Disneyland, and as a supplemental feature, and they said it was so popular it actually drove sales. And he said, what if we recreate the Sleeping Beauty Castle walkthrough as it was in the 50s as a supplemental feature on the Sleeping Beauty Blu-ray?"
Right.
Because it was the first feature animated film Blu-ray that Disney put out.
Mm.
And I said, "Oh, that'll be fun." And he said, "Yeah, and then what if we use that as a sales tool to the people down at Disneyland to actually bring it back to the way it was?" And I said, "Well, you're crazy. That's never going to work." But that's exactly what we ended up doing. So it was really cool.
The chicken did come before the egg in this case.
Yeah, we had this beautiful, CGI recreated version of the walkthrough, and it's on at least it's on the original Blu-ray 2-disc set of Sleeping Beauty as a supplemental feature. So you get to travel through it as it was. And then we just took that down to the president of Disneyland at the time and pitched it to him and said, "Look what used to be down here," because the castle walkthrough had actually been shut down since 9/11.
Right.
Apparently, Homeland Security had contacted Disney and said, "The castle is one of the icons of America, and we feel it might be a terrorist threat." So they just shut it down completely, and so it had been closed for many years. We were able to take this and go, "Here's what you have," and we could bring it back to what it was, and we've kind of already done the design work by recreating it in the computer, so we just need to go into production on it, and that's what we did. And,
Right. So one of the scenes that you worked on, which I think was something that was different from the 57 version, is you did the scene with the dragon and Prince Philip.
It's very strange, but for whatever reason, the 1957 version did not have a scene with the dragon in it.
Right.
And it's weird because they would have known about it at that point, but regardless, there wasn't one. So Tony said, "We got to have a dragon scene," and I agreed with him. So we took, there was a small scene with a bottomless pit, a well that with your voice, and we got rid of that. And we took one of the scenes of the spinning wheels rotating into infinity and kind of made it smaller and put it in that room. And then we had a big space kind of close to the end where we could do something. So I looked at some concept art by Ivan Earl that had not been published that kind of lent itself to forced perspective and based this new scene around that. And then we animated the dragon in After Effects. And it's a big Pepper's Ghost room, so Maleficent is there, and then there's a big explosion, and she turns into the dragon that blows green fire all over it. And I was really so happy with how it turned out, and especially Marty Sklar walked it with us before we opened it and told me Ken Anderson would have been proud, and that almost made me cry because I was really trying to channel what Ken Anderson had done. And I had met Ken Anderson once a long time ago, just before he passed away, but certainly didn't get to know him at all, so it meant a lot to me to actually be able to do this project.
And you can see one of those images sort of shows how all the individual parts were separate so they could move.
Right.
You could animate them. Sort of an interesting...
We couldn't afford to use feature animation to animate it for us. We do it all ourselves, so we did it in After Effects. So I kind of took the dragon sketches and I broke her apart into all the pieces that I wanted to move. And then the animator worked with me, almost like a shadow puppet, kind of did it. But it all worked because the look of that film is very stylized. So.
Wow, that's really cool.
And here's some really interesting sketch work that you did, and then the final, from sketch to finalization of the Sleeping Beauty scene.
Yeah, those top two are my rough sketches showing how it would break down to show to Tony, and then to John Gritz, who's an effects kind of genius who works down at Disneyland keeping the attractions working. So he did all the special effects for the show, and it was kind of show him. And then the bottom two are obviously Aurora falling asleep in the, I forget what scene it is, I think it's scene 7 on her bed. But again, that was kind of important to make sure she looked like she did in the film. So.
Oh, of course.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I have not seen this. Again, I haven't been back to Disneyland since 9/11, but I have seen that video many times, and it's wonderful. And also, they show that video in a special room for people with disabilities.
Yep.
So that they're able to experience the walkthrough if they can't actually physically walk through it themselves.
Yeah,
which is sort of
that
fun.
was something that was important to us. And well, I didn't design that room, but I was definitely a proponent of it, because if we didn't have an ADA compliant room, people who had disabilities weren't going to be able to experience it. So at the very least, they're able to be in, I mean, you're physically in the castle and see what people are seeing upstairs. And it's very close to what we actually did. So.
Right. There's only a few things that were changed from the 57 version. You definitely added some more sophisticated technology, but the scenes, aside from the dragon scene, are pretty much the same as they were in 57, which is pretty neat for a Disney fan like me. I'm planning on visiting Disneyland next year, and I'm really looking forward to this. This is one of the things I'm looking forward to the most, because I haven't been able to see it yet. So,
well, you have to let me know if you like it or not.
Oh, I definitely know I will, and I will let you know what my thoughts are for sure. So moving outside of Disney, but Disney adjacent, definitely, because we all know the Shrek movies were inspired by Disney. They're almost playfully lampooning Disney. In Singapore, you did some amazing work for their Universal Studios park. And this is one of the attractions, one of the major attractions there. Tell us about this.
So in 2009, I left Disney and I spent 4 years in Singapore working on Universal Studios Singapore. And I almost kind of consider it the booby prize of getting all the Shrek stuff, because the Shrek, just to be honest, is not my favorite film in the world. But, you know, I get that they basically are lampooning, Disney. So that's kind of funny in its own way. But it's fine. But what I did really enjoy was delving into the world of Shrek and seeing a lot of the wonderful eye candy and props and backgrounds that the team had made for that film. So we had several attractions there. There's a recreation of or a version of the Shrek 4D show. And there's a kiddie coaster that I kind of completely redid when I joined the team, called Enchanted Airways. And the conceit is that you're getting on a quote unquote airplane that's flying around the land far, far away. And I was able to basically reimagine and start over again on this little children's roller coaster that they had. And it's actually the same track layout and vehicle that they have of the Hagrid's roller coaster in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Florida. Same conveyance, same layout, the track's identical. But really, we reimagined it as it's almost like an airport, and you're flying around the area far, far away, and it's run by the secondary and tertiary characters from Shrek. And so you've got Pinocchio, he's the maintenance man out on the tarmac there. And as you leave the dispatch station, you kind of sidle up alongside his maintenance shed, and he says, "This ride is perfectly safe." And then his nose grows.
He's fibbing.
Which was cute because DreamWorks loved that because it was very sarcastic, which goes with the tone of the movie. But Universal Studios Operations Department was not happy that we were insinuating that the ride
would be safe. Yeah, wow. So this is a picture of your concept and models and mock-ups for that Pinocchio scene, and here is
some of my working drawings, and then and then the next slide is some of the gentlemen out there actually building his little shed.
Right.
If anyone's ever been to Singapore, they know it's hotter and more humid than the worst day in Florida by far. So it's actually physically exhausting out there. But, two gentlemen from Japan. I forget. I want to say one of them is Mamiya-san, and the other one is Goto-san, I think are their names, and they actually worked with us on Shanghai Disneyland as well. But they're wonderful sculptors and rockwork sculptors and designers and really good artists. And so they built this little shed off the drawings I built. So it's always a fun part of the project for me when you get to see things being built based off your designs. That's kind of an amazing feeling.
And it must be even more amazing when this happens. You get to see the final outcome of your design. Yeah, this is the final install.
The thing is he's got some little posters in there. In fact, he's got kind of almost like a Playboy poster of a female puppet up on the
Oh, goodness.
It's able to get away with things in this show that certainly would not have been able to get away with at Disney. But it's cute and it works really well, and it's just and I especially love how some of these things look at night with some of the nighttime lighting. So
Days without a crash, that's sort of not very assuring.
it's not meant to be reassuring. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So you worked on another fun scene from this attraction. It looks like it's based on 3 blind mice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when this ride got redesigned, there was always meant to be something in the middle of all these, I don't know if helixes is the right term, but where the coaster track rolls around in a circular fashion. And we had the dragon in there at once, like a big life-size dragon, the dragon that falls in love with Donkey, and that got shot down as too expensive. So what we did end up building is we built this tower, and I decided, what is this tower? Well, this tower is where the 3 blind mice store all their cheese, right? So it's ye old cheese tower, and as
cheese
you
tower.
Around, the 3 blind mice are actually up on top, and if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the details of it. There's
Adorable.
one of the mice, they're blind, right? So one of the mice is holding up a sign that says "Turn here," but it's upside down.
Upside down. Yeah. So cute. And, definitely Disney adjacent for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, that was the idea, was to, I design better in the kind of Fantasyland type things.
Right.
And so I was glad to get the chance to do some of this.
Now, speaking of dragons, you were able to build some amazing floats. Well, design and have built some amazing floats for a parade also in Singapore. One of them was based on, again, Shrek.
Mm-hmm.
And here is that amazing dragon, and here's your concept and some models.
So this is the opening year parade for Universal Studios Singapore that ended up being called Hollywood Dreams, and it's basically there are 6 themed, I don't want to say units, but 6 themed parts to the parade.
Right.
And so one of them is a Shrek themed part, and I felt bad that we didn't get that oversized dragon in there because I felt like she really is one of the major characters from the film and should be represented. Yes. And I kind of gave a challenge to the team. I wanted the float. We would have a costume Shrek riding up top, but I wanted her to be able to crane her neck and look lovingly at Donkey and bat her eyelashes. It's not easy
because she's in love with him in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a sweet little moment where they showed their love for each other.
That's adorable. So. Yes, and here is the construction of the float.
Yeah, so we built the chassis and the main body, believe it or not, at an abandoned fireworks factory in Malaysia. And while we were working on that, there was a team, Michael Curry Designs up in Portland, Oregon, who's done a lot of parades and did the original Lion King Broadway show. And so they helped work out how we would get the dragon head to actually turn her neck and bat her eyelashes at Donkey, and it's this spiral cut, almost like a slinky, sort of an armature.
Yes. So it's sort of like in sections that can move. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah,
and here...
So we worked on the rigid parts in Malaysia, and then if you go to the next slide,
here's the final. Yes. Beautiful work.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And you got Puss in Boots there, too.
Oh, I think that's
adorable.
A character, though.
Yeah. That's a character. Yeah.
We designed that. That was the first time they had shown Puss in Boots as a walk-around character.
Oh, really?
There was a company not far from Imagineering in Glendale that did a lot of costume walk-around characters.
Oh, yes.
They did this, yeah.
Now, it looks like you did another float for the same parade, but this is based on not a dragon, but a cousin of a dragon. It looks like a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
So we had a Jurassic Park section, and unfortunately, the Jurassic Park ride at Universal Singapore, everything got value engineered out so much that the T-Rex attack at the end was kind of underwhelming, especially considered to what they have today in other Universal parks. So I felt bad about that, and we wanted to have a full-size T-Rex on the float, although she's not really full-size. She's about three-fourths size of how she is in the film. But the idea was, well, we're going to have this full-size T-Rex. She's going to be really big. We can't really afford a lot of movement. She's going to be basically a big puppet. So we boiled it down to what are the key movements? And really, this mama T-Rex, she's got an up-down movement. She's got a left-right head neck turn, and then her mouth opens and closes, and that's all she does. But when it all works together in tandem, it actually works pretty well.
There's pretty terrifying, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And here is the I assume this is the model, well, the full size being constructed, almost done, and then in the park, the actual parade.
Yeah. And they're still using this today. She's pretty impressive. There's a puppeteer who sits about where her pelvis would be with a counterweight system that makes her rise up and down. So it's all human powered. It's not cool. Electrical or mechanical in any way. It's all she's basically a big puppet.
Wow, that's really cool.
It is cool, yeah.
So, moving back to Disney again, looks like you did some work on one of everybody's favorite new attractions, Radiator Springs Racers.
Right. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to do some of the show set design for it, and let's see. Tom Morris asked me to work on it, who's a good friend of mine and also a big Disney historian and a great designer as well. And Robert Coltrane had done some original track layouts of this, and so I kind of took this to the next level and tried to do more detailed show set drawings, more as a guide for the model makers than anything else. So you're looking at the overall plan view of Radiator Springs Racers, but if you go to the next slide, there's some close-ups on the plans and some elevations, and just really kind of worked it out for them because if you're familiar with CAD drawings, they're very clinical and they're very there's not a lot of detail to them, and I'm a big fan of show set drawings that were done, in the 50s and 60s when they had to be done by hand. There wasn't computer-aided design. I think it's really helpful for the model makers and for the people doing the final show design as something to key off of. So that's what these are.
Great. So you sort of helped with the staging and layout by doing these overhead maps based on the computer generated, but with more human details.
And some things changed along the way. Like on this slide, you'll see that there's supposedly 2 maters. They cut that down to they broke it into 2 sections, which was a lot smarter because if one of these maters breaks down, the whole scene breaks down, and you have to kind of go one on one. So
So in the mid 20-teens, you traveled to the land of the rising sun and worked on Disney's 4th major themed resort, Shanghai Disneyland. And here you are with...
Right. Just to correct you, the land of the rising sun is Japan.
So I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
The land next to the land of the rising sun.
So I left Universal Singapore and came back to work on Shanghai Disneyland, and so I ended up being the senior production designer for Mickey Avenue, which is kind of the Main Street USA of Shanghai Disneyland, and it's kind of half Main Street, half Toontown. If that makes sense.
And it's the only park that has this area. And it looks like you worked on 2 specific areas that are themed to, favorite Disney characters. One of them based on the characters from Ratatouille.
Well, I worked on the whole land, so anything with characters and show windows.
Oh, wow,
and
okay.
details are all me. But this is specifically, we have basically a, for lack of a better term, a muffin shop and coffee shop themed to Ratatouille. And so the idea was, as you're queuing up and you're getting your muffins or whatever you're getting, walking along with your tray, we wanted to have a moment with Remy the rat, and we thought, well, how are we going to do that? And the drawing at the top, originally I wanted to do a little scene with a little shadow projection. The idea was that we wanted to sell the idea that Remy's back there making your food, and you don't see them out and restocking. Unfortunately, that wall was a firewall, so we couldn't actually build into it, and we also kind of couldn't afford what I wanted to do. So what we did was we worked with Pixar, basically came up with a glorified monitor shroud. So there's little silhouettes of Remy and his brother Emile running back and forth making food that you see as a shadow. And Pixar took the existing animation from the Ratatouille attraction in Paris and kind of redid it for us, but with more fruit-related gags. And the idea is that out there, it's like it's like you're looking into the area where someone walks in and out of a kitchen, and Remy's got a little gondola saucepan there that he comes out and adds things to, and then on the far left he's got a little break room where he's got a shrine to Gusteau. He's kind of cute.
Oh yeah, that's cute.
And here's some of the construction.
So this is they tend to make original full-size working designs of things here in foam, but in China they like to use clay. So this is all made out of clay, and then you can see we added vents on the side because, again, this is basically a monitor shroud, so monitors get hot, you need somewhere for the heat to go.
Right.
And things like the bracketing we actually made up in the shop as we went on napkin sketches, and then that's kind of the bottom left is kind of staging it on the wall for people to see. So when the creative director would come in, or Bob Weiss or someone would come in, they would see kind of what it looked like. And then if you go to the next slide, we're actually staging it up on the wall at the SPC, which was the show production facility. And it's kind of like, we've got it painted, we've got it up and working and ready to go. This is the staging before we install it in the shop. Here's your last chance to make comments and or changes before we install it. So that's always the smart thing to do for executives, so you don't get a comment once you've finished all the work and you have it installed.
Right, and I know that during Walt Disney's lifetime, they did that also in the WED studio. They would set it all up, do a mock-up, and then they would ship it all out to Disneyland, with a plan already implemented. And they just had to put it in. So the next slide looks like the final installation, and you can see the shadow characters in that little window space.
Yep. Yeah, I was pretty happy with how it came out. It's pretty cute. So I haven't been back since I left, but everything I've seen, it looks really cute. So.
Oh yeah, it does. And then another major area, and I didn't realize, and I apologize, that you had worked on all of the areas, but another area that you wanted to showcase that you worked on was the clip joint, which is a barber shop.
So we have a bunch of little show windows in Mickey Avenue, not unlike what you have on Main Street, USA, but these are very kind of Toontown type things. The idea is that Mickey Avenue is where Mickey and all his friends and cartoon characters work, live, and play. And so one of the things is we have a barber shop. It's called the Clip Joint. We decided, well, it's run by the Weasels from Mr. Toad and also from the Roger Rabbit film. But there's all sorts of deep cut things we did here for the fans. So there's a Daisy Duck, calendar that's got elements from the Polynesian Resort in Florida. Then you can see July 17th, the opening day of Disneyland is circled. Since this shop is run by the Weasels, we've got a door, and on one side of the door you can see it says we'll be back soon, because there's no one in the shop when you're looking at it. And on the other side you'll see that they've written it on the deed to Toad Hall, because if you remember, the Weasels stole There's a backwards clock in there, because in my research I saw in the 19th century a lot of barber shops had clocks with the numbers printed backwards because so if you looked at it in the mirror, you
In
could
the
read it
mirror.
right.
Oh, yes.
Oh, how
Clever.
There's lots of little deep cut things in there like that, and I remember, taking Bob Wise through it all, and he said, "Chris, no one is going to know what this stuff is." And I said, "No, that's the whole point.
cool. Right.
It's a deep cut thing that you're going to go back and you're going to do research and try and find out where these things came from, and maybe you'll buy another DVD,
Yeah.
or maybe you'll learn about the animated history of the company." This
Yeah.
was a barbershop chair, and we tried really hard to find a barber chair that would fit the space. We couldn't find one, so we ended up just sculpting it. And they did a really good job. They made the tuck and roll upholstery look really close to how it really looks. But it's a big
Yeah.
sculpture.
Wow.
Yeah, and it has sort of it's sort of, it looks real, but it has a cartoon quality to it, which is kind of fun. And then you have some
There's a balance of strike between the real world,
and the toon world, which is what the land sort of is about as well. So you also created some fictional products to put on display.
Right. I think it's fun, and that's something I kind of picked up from Rolly Crump is there's a lot that's fun about signage and graphics that you can play with, and if you've got a bunch, if I'm going to put 20 shampoo bottles on the shelf, I want it to relate to something. If someone's going to take the time to read that label, I want them to go, "Oh, that's from Lambert the Sheepish Lion."
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you don't know about it, and maybe you go back and you try and find that cartoon and learn a little bit more about it. Because there's this wonderful, rich history in all the Silly Symphony shorts that happen in a lot of these package films that they put out in the 40s that have these little 20-minute animated bits that maybe people are not as familiar with as they are with the full-length classics.
Right.
Definitely.
And Mac's hair is a deep cut from an early Silly Symphony. The tortoise and the hare. I love Mac's hair tonic. Hair tonic. That's cute. So, here's another one, and this is sort of your mock-up of how the final will look.
This is earlier in the process. This is kind of taking all the elements and staging them, and we did it in 3D, and we did it in a physical model too. And then that up on the top left, that's an early sketch by Tim Kirk, who's a good friend and a really wonderful designer who did a ton of work on Tokyo Disneysea among many other projects. Tim's a great designer.
Yes, and I love how it has Donald's hat hanging on the hat rack. So this picture looks like some of the different hairstyles you can choose from.
So obviously the gag is you go to a hair salon, a lot of times you see styrofoam heads that have wigs on them. And so we wanted to have something like that. So for me, I wanted to do something related to my 80s teenage years, and so the goofy on the left, I can't believe they let me do this. On the left is a flock of seagulls.
Yes.
And in the middle is a punk rock Goofy, and then the one on the far right was originally going to be a B-52's hairstyle. But at the second, the guys in the computer lab were playing, who had digitally sculpted these, were playing around, and they put Ariel's hair from the the scene. So when the Little Mermaid ride opened, which I worked on too, originally her hair was that scene, where she kind of waves her hands and the fish, spin her hair up into, and it looks like a Frosty Freeze swirl.
It does.
And it made it into the attraction, but it didn't work too well. It kind of looked like some weird motorized thing, so they took it out very quickly and put her hair back in the down position. But we repurposed that sculpt for Goofy there, just as kind of a deep cut, funny thing. So that's Ariel's hair on Goofy's hair.
Wow. So here's the final. How it looks in actuality in the park.
Yeah, it came out cute. And a lot of it,
It is.
There's so many people who touch these things and work on them and make them so much better than they are. I'm really responsible for what's inside this window. But the color scheme and the design and the architecture and the graphics on the exterior were all done by other people. Really, really wonderful work. And it just, it's really nice to, when everything comes together and, it kind of works in harmony as one cohesive thing. I don't think, there's probably 100 different people who are responsible for how this barbershop looks. So
yeah,
good forget how many people it takes to actually successfully just the lighting or the audio that's playing as you walk by.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Who would have thought that so much work and planning goes into a window
Just
display?
one window of many
Yeah.
on a street of
Yeah.
many windows.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Now this next one is really fun. It looks like there was some thinking about redoing some of the chase scenes in the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction.
I did this so Tony Baxter was in charge of Disneyland for a time, and it's really where the Hatbox Ghost project came from originally. But one of the things Tony asked me to look at was there's a little area just before the scene, the chase scene, which is all related to food now. He wanted it's kind of a void area. There's nothing going on, and if you match it up or look at some pictures of pirates, the architecture exists there. And the idea was that there was going to be a female pirate, and she was looking at a bunch of treasure they had, and then there was a parrot being chased by another pirate going in a circle on a turntable. Right. So this was an idea that didn't go anywhere at all, but just was like a fun little gag that I don't think people have seen before. So it
really,
I did
cute.
it for Tony. He pitched it, didn't go anywhere. There's a million things like this at Imagineering where someone comes up with an idea for something, for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen. So.
But you never know. A lot of these ideas do resurface, even decades later.
Obviously, I was trying to channel, what Marc did with Pirates here. Certainly didn't draw it anywhere near as good as Marc did, but trying to make it look like what Marc would have done with it, which I think is important to kind of honor the original designers in what you're doing.
So you did some projects that were not realized for, I believe, Universal also, and this one, Kung Fu Panda, favorite family film. What was this about?
Yeah, well, so when we were finishing up Universal Studios Singapore, there were a couple of attractions that were planned for the next couple of years afterwards. There's not a lot of land there left over, but one of the areas, which ended up turning into a Puss in Boots attraction. Originally, we were going to do a Kung Fu Panda attraction. And originally, it was kind of a smallish, dark ride, and then it turned into almost a Big Thunder Mountain Railroad size, runaway rickshaw sort of a thing. So these are all gags and story sketches from that as to what it could be. The Rockwork sketch I did down at the bottom left, I remember our creative executive, Kevin Barbie, almost had a heart attack because what it would have cost to sculpt all that rockwork would have been, we're talking like, Batu levels or Cars Land levels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was just trying to think of something, really big and interesting and fun. That's kind of what I like to do to start off with.
Yeah, you have to think big and then whittle it down to what's practical. And here's some more fun sketches.
All the scenes that would have been in the ride, different things that you would have seen. Some of the animation would have been limited. Some of it would have been more sophisticated. But the idea is that these wolves are menacing the town that Poe and all his friends are in as you zip around on these little rickshaws. And if you go to the next slide, there was a whole scene where you went over the rooftops of the town and did these kind of humpy bumps going up and down over them, and you would actually go down into caves where there were show set scenes where it looked like they were maybe mining or drilling into the earth or pouring lava that they sculpted up, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Next one is, this is going over a rickety bridge, and a bunch of the wolves would be menacing you both inside and outside as you zipped across this kind of chasm. So this would have been fairly expensive to do, and unfortunately at a certain point they decided it was going to be way too expensive to do. So that got changed into a smaller scoped Puss in Boots themed ride. So this next slide is kind of my attempt at kind of doing a little kiddie ride in little wagons, because there's a scene with wagons, and Puss in Boots is a very funny film as well too. I was disappointed that Kung Fu Panda got canceled, but this was going to be kind of cute too. And so it started off as a simple little kiddie ride, and then it kind of grew in the opposite direction into something more expensive. So for the slide, they did build elements of this of this Jack and the Beanstalk inspired tower with basically a straight up vertical lift on the conveyance. They certainly didn't build anything this big. This would have been incredibly expensive to do. But they did build these little. The idea was that there were these little boat flying vehicles that Humpty Dumpty had invented, and so you're riding on these crazy contraptions. And the conveyance, we looked at, it was really fun because the vehicle would kind of swing out to the sides, left and right.
Oh, yeah.
Cute. And then if you go to the next one, there was a big finale scene with Puss in Boots where you went through the kind of the cat town, and they were all giving a big musical performance, and so you saw the cats, and there was a goofy cow in there, and you kind of slowly worked your way up in a circular fashion into the town. There's a cute moment in the film where there's a cat that pops out and goes, "Oh!" and kind of covers his mouth, so that was going to be in there, and lots of other little gags. Ultimately, again, these designs I did right before I left Universal Singapore to start on Shanghai Disneyland. And again, most of these ideas were scrapped. It was just going to be really a lot more expensive than the people who own Universal Singapore wanted to pay for. So.
Well, that was amazing. And we're going to move on to another area of interest, which is the books you have written and co-authored and put together, which, for lack of a better word, have preserved some of Southern California's theme park history, including this amazing book, which has the most amazing title ever.
Well, you can thank Bruce Gordon for that. So Bruce Gordon is the other half of former Imagineering that did the book The Nickel Tour, which is really the book that really inspired me. Bruce helped me out with a lot of documentation of Knott's Berry Farm early on. Rewinding back a little bit, I was helping out Leon Jansen at the E-Ticket magazine, and their first couple of issues that they had done for that magazine, they didn't just talk about Disneyland, they talked a lot about Knott's Berry Farm and Pacific Ocean Park history as well. And being a Southern California kid, I was just as interested in that as I was the Disney stuff. And so at a certain point, they got away from that and kind of made the magazine all Disney because that's what sold. But I said, what about Knott's? The history of Knott's, and some of these people aren't going to be with us anymore. And, so I just started on my own tracking down people like, Bud Hurlbut or members of the Knott family or employees who'd worked there since the 40s who were all in their 70s and 80s at that point. And started doing interviews with them, and if they had copies of artwork or old photos, I would scan those in. And so at a certain point, I felt like I had enough for a book. So I was trying to get my first book off the ground. So Bruce Gordon really helped me with that. And Bruce said, you should call this book Knott's Preserves. Bruce was very punny, and if you read The Nickel Tour or any of his other books, you'll see how sarcastic and punny Bruce was. But so he came up with the title. My publisher wanted to change it to Knott's Preserved, as that read better, but it's a double entendre, right? We're preserving history, but also there's jelly preserves. Ha ha ha.
Right. Famous boysenberry.
Yeah.
Yes. And just a fun fact: the boysenberry was created by Knott's Berry Farm.
Well, I wouldn't say created. That's a little too on the nose. What Walter Knott did was he actually found the last 6 struggling boysenberries down by a creek that were developed by a man named Rudolph Boysen, and he kind of abandoned them. And so at that point, those were the last 6 boysenberries in the world. Wow. Walter Knott took those boysenberries back to his farm in Buena Park and nursed them back to health.
And preserved them.
Preserved them and did cuttings and started selling the boysenberry. And the boysenberry was like twice as big as regular berries at the time. They touted them as big as your thumb. That's what really put Knott's Berry Farm on the map. That and the chicken dinners, which followed soon after. But the boysenberry, Walter Knott could have named it the Knott berry, but he named it after Rudolph Boysen, the man who created the original hybrid. So every boysenberry in the world does trace its roots back to Knott's Berry Farm because of that. But he didn't. But Walter Knott didn't invent the boysenberry. Rudolph Boysen.
Okay, glad to clarify that. Yeah, but he saved it from extinction.
He absolutely did. He absolutely did.
So the next slide is from the book. We get a little sneak peek into how the book is laid out. And
Yeah,
some
so
really
you see
fun
some-
pictures.
The interesting thing to me was, there actually had been a few books written about Knott's Berry Farm, but they mostly focused on Walter Knott's early days in farming and maybe the boysenberry and the chicken dinner restaurant. But I, of course, being a theme park designer, was very interested in the concept art and the designs that went behind the buildings. It's a bit of a misnomer. A lot of people think all the buildings at Knott's Berry Farm are old buildings repurposed. And while a few of them are, most of those buildings actually have been designed. And one of the earliest park art directors was a gentleman named Paul von Kleben, who was born in Austria in the late 1800s, but he was obsessed with American Western culture. So a lot of these buildings were designed by him, and we were fortunate enough to get our hands on the original artwork that he did that Russell Knott, Walter's son, had saved. So there, and he was this self-taught artist, so there's something kind of naive about his artwork, but I really like it too. So these are some elevations of the bottle house and the glass house as they still stand at Knott's Berry Farm today. It was important to me to show that because the artistry behind the designs of the attractions at Knott's had not been really done in a book before.
Amazing. I remember these, of course, from going there as a child. The bottle house, absolutely. And here's another long gone Knott's Berry Farm remnant.
Well, this was never actually built. So this is some concept artwork done by Mentor Hubner, who's a famous artist. And Bud Hurlbut, he designed the mine ride and the log ride, among other things, at Knott's Berry Farm. He had a little area across the street. He had a little lagoon, and he had a little boat ride called, he named it the Cordelia K, after Cordelia Knott. And he had a little train ride, and he had a merry-go-round over there. And he wanted to build what turned into a fur trapper miner's Western version of the Jungle Cruise. And we're going to go through on these boats, and you were going to see all these Old West scenes, and you were going to go into a cave. And so this is the concept art that Mentor Hubner did for Bud, that Bud still had when I knew him in the 90s. And it would have been really wonderful. But again, it's one of these projects that was going to happen for a while, and maybe for money reasons, maybe for other reasons, it just never quite happened. So it's interesting to see what could have been.
Absolutely, it's fascinating. And now, one of my personal favorites, and really something I miss so much, the Knott's Berry Tales, designed by another Disney legend, Raleigh Crump.
Yeah, I was 5 years old when this ride opened, and it hit me really, really strongly, so much that I went back to kindergarten the next day and did drawings of Crafty Coyote and scenes from the ride. Yeah, and I showed those drawings to Rolly, and he went, "Oh my God!" But it really inspired me in a lot of ways in the designs that I've done. And one of the big things is, Rolly filled it up with so much wacky signage, and that's something that you can do. The Knott's Berry Tales ride, the figures were very limited. They were not sophisticated, but there were so many of them, and the color and the art direction was done so well. And then one of the things that Rolly absolutely loaded it up with all these signs and graphics, with all these doing a sign is not as expensive as doing a fully animated, showpiece.
Sure.
And it just was really charming in its day. It was really wonderful, and I'm so happy that Knott's, although it's a radically different experience, it's in the same building. There's a Knott's Berry Tales that's back today that you can ride. And it's popular, and I couldn't be happier with how they did that.
I'm really looking forward to experiencing it. When I go to California next year, we definitely plan to take a side trip to Knott's because of this and some of the other things they've brought back.
Knott's is still so charming. It's wonderful.
Oh, yes.
I was there for Halloween Haunt preview last week, and it's still really great. And it's actually just really nice to be back after being locked down for a year to see things starting to come.
Sure, definitely.
Now, this next book that you did is based on a park that no longer exists. It only exists in our collective memories. And in my case, and Ruthie's case, it doesn't even exist in our memories. We just know it from pictures and hearing other people who remember it. Because there's really nothing left of it. And that is POP, Pacific Ocean Park.
Yeah, so it's fascinating because I'm with you. I was born too late to experience it.
Yeah.
It was abandoned and rotting the year I was born, and yeah, there's a good picture of it rotting. Yeah, that might be
what a
from
shame.
that might be from like 1971, 1972. I have to check
Yeah.
the dates, but it was interesting because when I was growing up, my mother had saved a bunch of theme park guidebooks from her childhood, so she had early Disneyland and Knott's, and of course we went to Disneyland and Knott's, but she had this one guidebook for Pacific Ocean Park that was full of this amazing concept art. And if you go to the next slide, some of that's actually from it. And I remember looking at that and asking my mother, saying, well, this is amazing. Where is this? And she said, oh, it's not there anymore. It's long gone. So I was fascinated, and especially that the souvenir guidebook didn't have any photos. It only had concept art.
Right.
So it's interesting that, in the mid-50s, the people who run Santa Anita, the racetrack, and CBS Television joined forces to try and do what Walt Disney did with Disneyland. They hired a bunch of motion picture art directors, and if you go to the next slide, you can see some of this concept art. It's absolutely fabulous. So they took these two piers that are not there anymore. They're south of the Santa Monica Pier, and designed attractions that were maybe not as good as Disneyland, but they were definitely up there for their time. And they really tried to take on Disneyland in the 50s, but by the mid-1960s, they were forced into bankruptcy due to mismanagement and other reasons. Part of the reason is, operating on a pier, you have to operate seasonal. You can't really operate during the winter like you can during the summer, which is something us in Southern California take for granted. I think with Disneyland being open year-round and Knott's being open year-round. But the concept art was absolutely unbelievable. So I was really interested in this kind of lost history. And so after I did the Knott's book, I thought this is really worthwhile in tracking down. And again, it was the same situation. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the great concept art. That's a model of a billboard done by Fred Harpman, who was the park art director, who was a really young art director. And he had all these motion picture art directors and designers working underneath him. And they designed this amazing park for the time and the budget that they had. And in fact, the entry statement, which you can see in that model at the top, really, to my mind, influences the theme building at Los Angeles International Airport.
Absolutely.
I think I think it was Luckman and Pereira, I think, designed that. I'm not sure, might have that wrong, but I think they were really influenced by this. So POP was really only around about 9 years before it went into forced bankruptcy. And then it sat there rotting on the pier until the mid-1970s. So it's this fascinating and cautionary tale about how not to run a theme park.
and when they eventually did demolish it, they left nothing of it. There's not even a plaque to recognize where it once was.
Yeah.
So unless you know it was there, you would never know it was there.
That was part of it. We were hoping, maybe some of the folks who run, LA City Council or something would put some sort of plaque or something out there. Because it was a big, it was two piers that went back to the turn of the century. So it had this amazing history.
It does predate by many years. When it became Pacific Ocean Park, it was still a themed area, an attraction. Many years before that. And if you are a fan of googie, mid-century modern architecture, this is your place, for sure. Yeah. Now we're going to talk about, moving back to Disney, your book on Marc Davis in his own words. And as we said before, you got to know Marc Davis personally, and here you are in his home, getting to know him and grilling him on some of his vast knowledge and the wonderful anecdotes he must have had.
Yeah. Well, I felt and still feel very privileged that I got to know him and Alice. They did a lot for me personally at school and helping me trying to get my way into Imagineering, and just as general life, advice people, besides learning about Disneyland designs, which of course Marc is kind of the master of staging for classic Disneyland attractions. He's an amazing animator too, and that's a whole nother part of his history, but there have been so many books done on animators and the Nine Old Men and animation history, but there really never was a book that was done in an exhaustive way on all the designs he did for the theme parks. And, you know, when I got to Imagineering in the 90s, the first thing I did was I went to the art library and kind of started checking out and looking, and there was so much artwork that no one had ever seen for projects that people knew very little about. I always thought it should be in a book, and he tried when he was alive to get something like this out, and there just wasn't the interest there. Luckily, the stars aligned, and so, you know, when I was in Shanghai, and after I'd finished the Pacific Ocean Park book, I called up my friend Pete Docter at Pixar, who I knew from when I went to CalArts. Pete was kind of a senior outgoing when I was a freshman ingoing, so I knew him, and I knew he was a big Disneyland fan. And I just thought, we should really do something on Marc that really honors him, and Alice too, while Alice is still with us. So I called Pete up and I said, hey, you know, I've got this idea to do this really, you know, big book on Marc's designs, but I really need like support, you know, at a high level. And you're this, you know, big shot director now, you know, would you be interested in working on this with me? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And from there it took off. So he called Wendy Lefcon at Disney Publishing and said, you know, Chris and I want to do this big book on Marc. I talked to Alice and I said, Alice, Pete and I would like to do this to kind of honor you and Marc, and there seems to be some interest there. And she said, oh my, yes, Marc would be so pleased. And so, we went with it, and really fortunate to do it at the time that we did. Alice opened up her entire home to us, so we found all kinds of amazing original rough sketches that Marc had kept and photos people had never seen before, and then worked really closely with my good friend Vanessa Hunt at Imagineering's art library. And if you go to the next page, there's a spread from the Jungle Cruise section. One thing that always bothered me about reproductions of Marc's artwork in books and some of these lithographs that they would sell at the Disney Gallery is the color was always really off, and they were using really old scans. And so Vanessa went back through and re-scanned every single piece of artwork you see in this book. And it looks the closest to the original artwork that I've ever seen, which was really important to me. And I have to give a shout out to Wendy Lefcon at Publishing, because this book is almost 800 pages, which is ridiculous.
It's 2 volumes. It's just jam packed with
picking it up. But I'm so happy because it's out there for the public to see, and people really get a sense. I'm trying to make the case. Some people would argue with this. That's fine. I'm trying to make the case by not saying but showing that Marc Davis, after Walt Disney, is probably the most important Imagineer that ever was. Because if you
I agree.
If you think about classic Disneyland, and you think about iconic scenes, you know, if you think about the Jungle Cruise, you think about the Elephant Pool, you think about the Traffic Safari. If you think about Pirates of the Caribbean, you think about the auctioneer scene, or the pirates trapped in the prison trying to get the dog to give them the key, or the Haunted Mansion, you think of the hitchhiking ghosts, or the operatives. These are all things that came out of Marc Davis's brain that are iconic, you know, things like the stretching portraits. They're iconic Disney history. You know, I kind of felt like, even though Marc Davis certainly had some hardcore fans, he really wasn't quite getting the due that he did, as important as he was. And these ideas all came out of his brain. And just the fact that he worked so closely with Walt Disney at the time, too, that Walt really trusted him to do the things that he did. It's important to get that out. And you can see on this spread, I made a concerted effort to show Marc's concept art juxtaposed with photos that are near to on opening day, to show how the staging was. Because people have come by after the fact and redone things or restaged things. And a lot of times, not as successful as Marc did, because maybe as an artist as Marc was. I think if you're going to touch these things, you have to at least do as well as was done before, and not just move things for the sake of moving things, which unfortunately has happened a lot.
Oh yeah, we both 100% agree with you. And if you're a Disney fan, you are a Marc Davis fan.
You might not know it, but you are.
Right.
If you're a classic Disney fan, you love Marc Davis. And also, I wanted to say about the staging, I watched your video on YouTube about your presentation you gave at D23 about this book, and you had some lost, like, archival footage of Marc Davis when they were installing the safari camp, and they show him going up into the scene, and he moves a pot. It was just like the placement of that pot must have been very important to him for some reason.
And unfortunately, that footage doesn't have any audio, and I almost thought we should hire a lip reader to see what he's saying.
I know.
Just picture him going, "Well, that pot shouldn't be
should be over there." Yeah. And here's another fascinating picture from your book.
And that's the other thing too. It was really important to me to put it in Marc's words as much as possible, because the amazing thing, Pete and I, the time that we spent with him in the 90s visiting at his home, we really wanted to recreate that. I said to Pete, people are going to be less interested in what you and I have to say about the design than hearing it directly from Marc, because let's be real, what we really want as historians is we want to jump in our time machine and go back in time and be a fly on the wall in Marc's office when Walt came in and said, "Hey, show me these pirate sketches and what you're doing with them, and what do you think about this?" And Marc cracking Walt up with the drawings like that. That's what I want to be. I don't want to hear me, bloviating about the glory of the 1964 New York World's Fair. I want to hear it from Marc. I want to hear it from and also the other people. You'll see there's a lot of little sidebars of other Imagineers who are working on similar things at the same time. I wanted to hear what they had to say. We're trying to get a sense of what Red Imagineering was like in the 1960s when Marc was doing all these things and Walt Disney was still alive.
Well, I think that's why this book is so important to Disney history, because you took the time and effort and spent all this time researching and finding all of these, little clips here or there and put it all in one place where all I have to do is pick up my book off the shelf and flip to a page and read it. I think that's amazing.
Amazing.
It was important to me to get this down, and I think, one of the things that, for me, I'm not interested in doing a book that is kind of the same thing over and over again.
Yes,
and there are a lot of books on Disneyland history where you see the same images repeated over and over again. And I understand why. It's easy to show the same pieces repeated over and over again because they're handy, they're there. But taking the time to go in the back or old files or go through someone's home and dig through things, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. It's why this book took us 5 years to do. Also, the fact that we had day jobs, and I'm in the field working on Shanghai Disneyland, and Pete's both running Pixar and directing.
Pete's a little busy too.
Right.
While we're working on this, on our lunch breaks and coffee breaks and train rides and any spare moment we had to. Even with that, it took 5 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's amazing, and you can definitely see the effort of both of you guys and everybody who helped you in this book.
Thank you.
Now we're really looking forward to your next project, which is a new book. And again, we mentioned this earlier. This is going to be, as stated, this is the cover art, which will be part of the book.
It's
a complete history of the whimsical attraction.
So, for those of you who don't know, I'm not with Disney anymore. I started a new job in March of this year, and so I'm extremely busy with that. But I was hoping, this was my COVID project. I talked to Rolly Crump, and I said, Rolly, the new version of Knott's Berry Tales is going to be coming out soon. I really would love to do a book, with you on the history of Berry Tales, but in exhaustive detail. Yeah. And I want to talk about what you were doing in the 70s when you left Disney for the first time. And I also want to talk a lot about Mary and Knott coming up with the idea of the Roaring Twenties, of which Knott's Berry Tales was a part of.
I love the Roaring Twenties.
So for those who don't know, the opening of the Roaring Twenties in 1975 with Knott's Berry Tales and the Corkscrew roller coaster, tripled attendance for Knott's overnight and made them basically the number 3 park behind Walt Disney World and Disneyland in terms of attendance in America. So it really put Knott's on the map in a way that it hadn't been before. And Marion Knott, to my mind, is the first female creative executive to really move forward and have success. So she needs to be celebrated for that as well.
Yes,
so it's kind of
course.
these two stories. And then when Rolly finishes the ride and leaves and goes on to other stuff, it's kind of the sad story of how Knott's Berry Tales was kind of neglected and left to rot, and then replaced with a dinosaur ride, and was gone for a long time. Not unlike Pacific Ocean Park, it was just kind of gone from the collective memory, other than people who remembered it as kids and really loved it and knew that Rolly designed it. So that it ends in a really nice way with Berry Tales coming back in the form it is today. I love that Knott's Berry Farm is leaning into their history. It's really cool. So for all those reasons, I thought it was important to put this out. And there's a lot of artwork that Rolly did in the early 70s that people haven't seen before. There's a lot of concept art for the Roaring Twenties area and the airfield that have not been seen before. So, but it's ending up being a very big book, and it's taking me a heck of a lot longer just to get my first draft done than I even thought. Again, it's a situation where I'm working on it on lunch breaks whenever I can, but that's why these things take me so long, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's, again, like the amount of time that it takes you to put this in together is so well worth it, because we all have this information then right at our fingertips, and I just think that's so valuable to theme park history in general, especially to Disney fans and to Knott's Berry Farm fans, because this is a classic attraction. And I loved it as a kid, and I can't wait for this book to come out.
This was my very favorite thing at Knott's Berry Farm as a kid, and the Roaring Twenties was my favorite part of Knott's Berry Farm as a kid. And I remember going back after having moved away from California for a few years. I went back in the 90s, and I remember just utter disappointment when it became a new boardwalk area. It was a shadow of its former self, and I'm just so happy that Knott's is starting to go back to its roots and bringing back some of these classics. So
no, they really celebrated it. Even it was haunted up, but for the Halloween haunt preview last week, they had people dancing the Charleston up on top of the Good Time Theater.
That's awesome.
Wonderful.
Which is now the Walter Knott Theater. So I think that might be its fifth.
Yeah, I think it was the Charles Schultz Theater for a while.
And we're not going to make any money on this book. That's one thing that David Mumford told me early on. He said, you don't expect you're going to make money on these, and I really haven't, versus the amount of hours I put in on it. But it's like you say, it's personally important to me to preserve this stuff and to get it out there in a form that people can reference and go back to who are interested in these things. Because I'm doing books that I would want to read when I was in my 20s or whatever, and trying to learn about this stuff. So
Well, you are not the only one who wants to read these books.
I'm really looking forward to this one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I'll be the first in line to get a copy. Chris,
let's see how much it's going to cost us to print a 300-page book ourselves.
It's not going to be as much as the Marc Davis book, so...
No, it won't. And honestly, the Marc Davis book should have been $250, and I'm amazed they got it down to the price point. You can get it for as cheap as $100 sometimes, and for the amount of material in the Marc Davis book, I think it's worth it. Maybe people would disagree, but it's...
Oh, I don't.
The amount of work we put into that book, the amount of work Pete and I and Vanessa and everyone else and Paul who laid it out, and just everyone who helped, it was a ridiculous amount of work.
Yeah, definitely.
And it shows, and it is, I recommend it highly, and I recommend all your works highly to any fan of Disney parks or theme parks or just any Disney fan at all, because there is such a close connection between Disney and these parks, and to really know Disneyland history, you sort of have to know the history of these other places too, because they're all interconnected, and they all took ideas. Like, I don't think Nature's Wonderland would have ever happened in the way it did had Walt not gone over and looked at what they were doing over there on the Calico Mine ride. So, it's all interconnected. So, Chris, it was wonderful to get to talk to you. Ruthie, do you have anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to ask Chris?
No, I think we touched on everything. I really appreciate you going through and really detailing all of these things that you showed us today about what you've worked on, because I don't think a lot of people know about that. So I really appreciate you providing us these images and going through.
If you go to my Twitter page or my Instagram page, last year I started posting a lot. You know, I felt like, since I wasn't with Disney anymore, I felt like I could go ahead and share a lot of this art finally.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's a lot of, and I put stuff up from time to time when I have time. There are a lot of projects I worked on over the last 25 years. So.
Oh, I was just like a kid in a candy store when you sent me all these images. I was like, oh my gosh. So I mean, we had sort of a different idea on how this interview would be, but when I looked at all those images, I was like, we need to talk about these images.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Like, absolutely. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time. And is there anything you want to share with our audience? Maybe anything upcoming, or any places you would like them to go?
The plan is for the Knott's Berry Tales book, as soon as I finish the first draft, my co-author Eric Insweiler is going to start working on layouts.
Right.
And then we'll need to edit that down a bit. And then tangentially, I've also been working with Don Hahn. We're doing a book on Disneyland rare images and rare concept artwork.
You had
and
mentioned
that's
that.
slated to come out in 2023. We
Amazing.
might be doing an exhibit with that as well.
Oh, yes.
And then long term after that, I don't have a publisher for it yet, but I've been quietly working on a book on Coney Island at the turn of the century.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of these really strange but really overwrought giant attractions that did end up, I think, inspiring what Walt Disney did.
Oh, of course. I remember seeing a documentary on PBS years ago on the American Experience about Coney Island, and I recorded it and I watched it over and over again. Fascinated.
Ken Burns' brother Rick Burns did that, and I really wish they put that out on Blu-ray. I just have a DVD copy of it, but it's actually worth hunting down the DVD because the broadcast version on PBS actually has less on it than the DVD version.
Oh, really? Wow.
And I wish they'd put it out on Blu-ray. And then there's just a lot that's turned up lately. There's an archive that's been selling glass negatives of all things from the turn of the century that finally cashed out last year, and so just acquiring images from that has been. Luna Park, Dreamland, and Steeplechase Park, along with all the little individual attractions at Coney Island from like 1900 to 1920. There's some jaw-dropping, amazing attractions.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to see that. I hope that happens.
Me too.
So what's your Twitter handle if people want to... Oh, I'm sorry.
I said find me a publisher for it.
I would if I could. And what, again, is your Twitter handle if people want to check out what you post over there?
I believe it's at CDylanM, so at CDYLANM. I think that's it. And I think it's the same for Instagram. I'm not really on Facebook these days so much, so those would be the two places to find examples of my work. But I would recommend going to Twitter because Instagram crops the images in a weird way. Like if
everything's square.
If I have a vertical image and then I have a horizontal image I want to group with it, it's going to cut one of them in two, and I can't. Maybe I'm a Luddite, but I can't figure out how to get it cropped correctly. Anyway. Yeah,
I know what you're saying. I've actually tried to put it on like create like a background and color it and then put it on a square background because I know. Yeah, but then it's too small. It's like if I'm going to throw something up there, I don't want to spend all day and all night because I'm just throwing it up for people. Yeah, right. I get you. Okay. Chris, thank you so much. We love to get to know you. We're going to definitely look for your upcoming publications, and I will for sure let you know my thoughts on Sleeping Beauty diorama once I get to see it and all the other things. And I hope you enjoyed your time with us. We definitely enjoyed our time with you. And thank you once again. All right. Have a great night. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed our wonderful interview. And I'd like to again thank Chris Merritt for joining us. And wow, we learned a lot, and I'm really looking forward to his upcoming publications. How about you, Ruthie?
Yes, I definitely agree. I mean, I'm enjoying his current publications as well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I would recommend. I don't have the Pacific Ocean Park book yet, but I do have the Knotts preserved, and of course, I have the Marc Davis book. And I've used that Marc Davis book multiple times for our podcasts, researching and things like that. So they are invaluable to me.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful for having that. And I mean, you guys should all go out and get that or ask for it for Christmas. You know, holidays are coming up soon, so that needs to be on your list.
My birthday is in 8 days.
Yep.
So, Ruthie, where can everybody find Jiminy Crickets on the web?
You can listen to all of our past shows, including audio versions of Dateline Jiminy Crickets, over on our website, jcricketpodcast.blogspot.com. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts under the name Jiminy Crickets. That's with an exclamation point, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review, which helps to promote the podcast. On our YouTube channel, we share updates to the Disney Chris website, including the Disneyland Magical Audio Tour, as well as past episodes of the Jiminy Crickets podcast and Dateline Jiminy Crickets. You can find our channel if you search for DisneyChris.com. And remember, .com is spelled out DOTCOM. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell. You can also join in the conversation over on our Facebook page, Jiminy Crickets Podcast, where you can also interact with Chris and me and Brian and all the fellow Cricketeers. But you can also stay up to date on the latest details of our many World Wide Web endeavors. In addition to all the normal places you have always found our podcast, you can now also find us over at the Roarbots, a unique website celebrating all aspects of geek culture, including Disney fandom. Here we share our new episodes twice monthly, as well as special best of episodes from our extensive back catalog of shows. We are proud to be a part of this motley crew of pop culture superfans, so be sure to check out this amazing website at www.theroarbots.com. If you would like to contact the show with your comments or questions, our email address is disneychrisdotcom@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.
You can also find us on Instagram. Our Instagram is DisneyChris_JC_podcast. And again, Brian's Instagram is Keeping Walton Disney, all one word. On Twitter, I'm at DisneyChris73. And we're all on Facebook. I'm Chris Linden, spelled Lyngon, as in Lyndon Johnson. And you can find Ruthie under the name Ruthie Brown, and Brian under the name Brian Crawford. My website is DisneyChris.com, home to the Disneyland Magical Audio Tour and the Disney Song of the Day. And on Patreon, if you want to help support us, you can find us at patreon.com/DisneyChris. And if you prefer to use PayPal or for other donation options, you can visit DisneyChris.com/donate. And Ruthie, do you have any final words for today?
Yes, to quote Walt Disney, laughter is timeless, imagination has no age, dreams are forever.
And always let your conscience be your guide. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Now it's time to say goodbye to all our company.
See you real soon.
K-E-Y.
Why? Because we like you.